Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Sarah as she finished getting ready. The room was bathed in the soft glow of her vanity light, which seemed to halo her as she adjusted the strap of her black dress. The fabric clung to her curves, accentuating her silhouette in a way that was both alluring and intimidating. Her long, chestnut hair cascaded in loose waves down her back, and she took a final swipe of lipstick before turning to me. "So, how do I look?" she asked, her voice light and playful. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "You look amazing, Sarah. Just stunning." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Really? You don't think it's too much for a night out?" "No," I said, my voice a touch too quick. "You look perfect. Laura and Steve are going to love it." Sarah smiled, but there was a flash of something in her eyes, confidence, maybe, or anticipation. She stepped closer, giving me a peck on the cheek. "Thanks, babe. I know you've been stressed with work lately, so I'm really looking forward to having a good time tonight." "I am too," I said, though the knot in my chest told a different story. I forced myself to focus on the evening ahead, determined not to let my insecurities ruin it. As we finished our preparations and made our way out of the apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be different. Sarah was always beautiful, but tonight, she seemed to shine with an extra glow that drew attention. I found myself glancing at her, my thoughts a tangled mess of jealousy and admiration. The Italian restaurant was bustling, filled with the rich aroma of garlic and tomatoes. Laura and Steve were already at a corner table, their faces lighting up as they saw us approaching. Laura was animated as usual, her laughter ringing out like music, while Steve greeted us with his characteristic calm demeanor. "Tom! Sarah! You made it!" Laura exclaimed, her voice filled with warmth. "You both look fantastic." "Thanks, Laura," Sarah said, slipping into the chair next to her. "It's so nice to get out of the house for a change." Steve gave me a friendly nod. "How's it going, man? Ready for a night of dancing?" "Absolutely," I said, though my smile felt strained. "Looking forward to it." The waiter arrived with menus, and we placed our orders. As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed easily at first. Laura regaled us with a humorous story about her latest work project, and Sarah, ever the performer, joined in with her own animated recounting of a recent client fiasco. Her laughter was infectious, but as the wine glasses emptied, I noticed a shift. Sarah was particularly lively tonight, leaning in a bit too close to Steve as she shared a story about a work event. Her hand brushed his arm in a way that felt too intimate, and my stomach churned with unease. I tried to push the feeling aside, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. "So, Tom," Laura said, drawing me back into the conversation. "How's the new project coming along?" "It's going," I replied, trying to sound more engaged than I felt. "Just a lot of late nights." Sarah was still engrossed in her conversation with Steve, her eyes bright with excitement. "And then," I told him, "if you want it done right, you have to." Steve chuckled, his hand resting lightly on the back of her chair. "You really put him in his place, didn't you?" Sarah's eyes met his, and for a moment, the connection between them felt too intense. "Yeah, I guess you could say that." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. The more Sarah laughed and flirted, the more isolated I felt. Laura and Steve seemed to be enjoying themselves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was pulling away from me, drifting towards a place where I wasn't invited. "Tom, are you okay?" Laura's voice broke through my thoughts. "You seem a bit distracted." "Just a lot on my mind," I said with a forced grin. "I'm sure I'll be fine once we hit the dance floor." Laura gave me a sympathetic smile, and I tried to return my focus to the conversation. But every time I glanced at Sarah, I saw her laughing a little too freely with Steve, her flirtatious energy rubbing salt into the growing wound of jealousy in my chest. After dinner, as we walked out of the restaurant, Sarah was practically bouncing with excitement. "I can't wait to dance," she said, linking her arm through mine. "It's going to be so much fun." Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, I replied, though my enthusiasm felt hollow. We made our way to the club, a popular spot known for its eclectic atmosphere and energetic vibe. The line outside was long, but Sarah and Laura were already chatting animatedly about their plans for the night. I trailed behind, trying to keep my unease at bay. As we finally entered the club, the music hit us like a wave. The lights flashed in a chaotic dance of colors, and the crowd pulsed with energy. Sarah and Laura immediately headed towards the bar, their laughter and chatter lost in the cacophony of sound. Steve and I hung back, and I tried to shake off the growing sense of unease. Steve seemed perfectly at ease, leaning against the bar with a relaxed demeanor. "Grab a drink?" he asked. "Sure," I said absently, still scanning the crowd for Sarah and Laura. As the night went on and Sarah and Laura remained absent, my unease turned into something heavier, something more troubling. I tried to convince myself they were just having a good time, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that something was wrong. The restaurant was a lively Italian bistro with checkered tablecloths and the warm aroma of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. We found Laura and Steve at a corner table, their glasses of red wine glinting in the soft, ambient light. Laura's laugh rang out as she spotted us, her excitement evident. "Tom!" "Sarah!" Laura called, waving us over. "You made it." Sarah slipped into the seat next to Laura with a graceful ease, her dress hugging her curves in a way that made me catch my breath. "Hey, Laura." "Steve. It's so great to see you both." Steve stood to greet us, his casual confidence evident as he shook my hand. "Good to see you, Tom. How's the week been treating you?" "Busy," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "But it's nice to get out for a change." Laura's eyes sparkled as she took in Sarah's outfit. "You look amazing tonight, Sarah. That dress is stunning." "Thank you," Sarah said, her eyes twinkling. I figured it was time for something a little more glamorous. As the waiter arrived, we placed our orders, pasta for everyone, with a side of garlic bread and a bottle of Chianti. The conversation started off easy, with Laura recounting a funny incident at her office. "So, I had this client who was just impossible to please," Laura said, her voice bubbling with amusement. "And I finally just told him, if you keep changing your mind, we'll need to schedule a new meeting every day." Sarah laughed heartily, her hand resting lightly on Steve's arm as she leaned forward. "Oh my God, Laura, I can totally relate. I had a client last week who..." Steve joined in, chuckling. "Sounds like you had your hands full." "Definitely," Sarah agreed, her eyes meeting Steve's. "It's been one of those weeks where everything that could go wrong, did." I watched as Sarah and Steve engaged in a lively back-and-forth. Their banter was easy and natural, but there was a familiarity in the way they interacted that made me uncomfortable. Sarah's laughter seemed a little too loud, her touches a little too lingering. Laura noticed my distraction and nudged me with her elbow. "Tom, what about you? How's the new project going?" "It's going well," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a lot of long hours." Sarah glanced over, her face brightening. "Oh, Tom's been working so hard. He's barely had time for anything else lately." Steve raised an eyebrow. "That sounds rough. Maybe tonight will be a good chance for you to unwind." "I hope so," I said, though my attempt at casualness felt strained. As the conversation continued, Sarah's flirtatious energy seemed to grow. She laughed a little too eagerly at Steve's jokes, her hand occasionally brushing his arm in a way that felt too intimate. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to keep my focus on Laura's stories. "So, Tom," Laura said, her voice cutting through my thoughts. "Any plans for the weekend?" "Just catching up on some work," I replied, my tone lacking enthusiasm. Sarah reached over to pat my hand. "Tom's been really stressed lately. We're hoping tonight will help him relax." Laura gave me a sympathetic look. "Well, you're in good company tonight. We're all here to have a great time." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. The more Sarah interacted with Steve, the more isolated I felt. Her attention, which should have been directed towards me, seemed entirely focused on him. I tried to shake off the growing unease, reminding myself that it was just a night out and that I was overreacting. As the waiter brought our main courses, the conversation turned to the dance club we were headed to after dinner. The topic of dancing brought a new energy to the table. "I've heard this place is amazing," Laura said, her eyes shining with excitement. "It's got this great mix of music, and the atmosphere is supposed to be electric." Sarah's eyes lit up. "I can't wait. I've been dying to dance all week." Steve leaned in, a playful glint in his eye. "I'll be the first on the dance floor with you, Sarah. How about a little competition?" Sarah laughed, her hand resting on Steve's arm again. "You're on." I watched their interaction with growing discomfort. It wasn't just that Sarah seemed to be enjoying herself more than usual, it was the way she was engaging with Steve, as if I weren't even there. Every touch, every laugh seemed to push me further away. Laura, noticing the tension, tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics. "So, Tom, tell us more about your new project. Any interesting challenges?" I forced myself to focus on her, but my attention kept drifting back to Sarah and Steve. My jealousy gnawed at me, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more it seemed to consume me. I knew I was being irrational, but I couldn't help feeling like a spectator in my own life, watching as Sarah and Steve's connection grew stronger, leaving me feeling like an outsider. As dessert arrived and the evening continued, I tried to engage with the group, but the knot in my stomach remained. The tension between Sarah and Steve was palpable, and no matter how much I wanted to push it aside, it was impossible to ignore. I had hoped tonight would be a break from the pressures of work, but instead, it felt like the beginning of something far more troubling. The neon lights of the club were a blur of colors as we approached the entrance. The thumping bass of the music reverberated through the ground, and the line to get in was long, filled with a mix of excited chatter and impatient murmurs. I looked over at Sarah, who was practically vibrating with excitement, her eyes wide with anticipation. "This place looks amazing," Sarah said, her voice barely audible over the music. "I've heard it's one of the best spots in town." Laura was practically bouncing on her heels. "I can't wait to hit the dance floor." Steve and I followed along, and I tried to match their enthusiasm. The line moved quickly, and soon we were inside, enveloped by a wave of sound and light. The club was everything it was hyped up to be: loud, vibrant, and electric. The dance floor was already packed, with people moving in sync to the pulsating beats. Sarah and Laura immediately headed towards the bar, their laughter and chatter blending into the club's chaotic symphony. I trailed behind, trying to absorb the atmosphere. Steve, ever the easygoing presence, leaned against the bar and looked around with an air of relaxed detachment. "Grab a drink?" Steve asked, his voice raised to be heard over the music. "Sure," I said, though my mind was elsewhere. I ordered a drink and took a sip, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in my stomach. "Tom, you okay?" Steve asked, glancing at me with concern. "You seem a bit off." "Yeah, just a bit tired," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's been a long week." Steve nodded, but his gaze was still focused on me. "You sure everything's all right? You seemed a bit distracted earlier." "Just some stuff on my mind," I said, shrugging it off. "I'm sure it'll be fine once we start dancing." "Right," Steve said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Let's head over to the dance floor then. The night's still young." As we made our way through the crowd, the music grew louder, a constant thrum that vibrated through my chest. I scanned the room, looking for Sarah and Laura. After a few minutes, I spotted them at the edge of the dance floor, Sarah's hand in Laura's, both of them laughing and swaying to the music. "Finally!" Sarah shouted over the music as we approached. "You've got to come and dance with us." Steve was already moving, blending into the crowd with a fluid grace that seemed effortless. I joined in reluctantly, trying to focus on the rhythm and not on a knot of discomfort that tightened in my chest. Sarah's energy was infectious. She was dancing with a freedom and abandon that was captivating. But as I looked around, I noticed that she and Laura had started to drift toward a group of people near the center of the floor. I followed, though my unease grew as I watched Sarah's movements become more animated and her laughter louder. A while later, I lost sight of Laura and Sarah. My concern grew as the minutes ticked by, and I tried to stay engaged with Steve, who was now chatting with a couple of people from the group. "Have you seen Sarah?" I asked Steve, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not for a bit," Steve said, glancing around. "She and Laura were over there a few minutes ago. They might have gone to get drinks or something." I nodded, though my anxiety continued to build. I decided to check the bar area again. As I made my way through the crowd, I noticed that Sarah and Laura were still nowhere to be found. The club's energy was overwhelming, and I felt increasingly out of place. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spotted Sarah, dancing with Steve. They were close, almost too close. Sarah's hands were on Steve's shoulders, and Steve's hands rested on her waist. Their movements were synchronized, and the way they interacted made my stomach drop. I stopped in my tracks, feeling like a fool. I tried to process what I was seeing: Sarah, who was supposed to be my partner, dancing intimately with another man. My heart pounded, a mix of hurt and anger bubbling to the surface. "Tom!" I heard Laura's voice behind me. She looked around, confused. "Are you okay?" I turned to face her, my voice strained. I just saw Sarah and Steve." Laura's expression shifted to one of concern. "What do you mean? Where are they?" "They're dancing together," I said, my voice tight. "It looks like they're really close." Laura's eyes widened, and she glanced over at the dance floor. "Oh my God." I watched as Laura's face turned pale, and she hurried off to the dance floor, likely to find Sarah and Steve. My emotions were a mess: hurt, betrayal, humiliation. I wanted to confront Sarah, demand an explanation, but I felt paralyzed, unsure of how to approach the situation. Steve approached me, his face showing a mix of confusion and concern. "Tom, what's going on?" I just need some air," I said, turning towards the exit. "I'll be outside." Steve nodded, but I could tell he was puzzled. As I pushed my way through the crowd, I could hear the music thumping, each beat a reminder of the growing rift between Sarah and me. Stepping outside into the cool night air did little to calm the storm inside me. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced, replaying the scene I had just witnessed. The trust one had in Sarah felt shattered, and the sense of betrayal was overwhelming. I wanted to believe that this was just a misunderstanding, but the image of her dancing so intimately with Steve was etched into my mind. As the minutes ticked by, I tried to calm myself, knowing that I would have to face Sarah again soon. The night, which was supposed to be a chance to unwind, had turned into a painful revelation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The drive home was a quiet, somber affair. Sarah sat beside me in the passenger seat, her silence heavy and awkward. The glow from the dashboard illuminated her face, and I could see the remorse in her eyes, but it did little to ease the pain that had settled in my chest. "So," Sarah said after a few moments, her voice barely more than a whisper, "I think we need to talk." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, focusing on the road ahead. "I think that's a good idea." We pulled into the driveway, the engines hummed the only sound between us. I turned off the car and took a deep breath before getting out. Sarah followed me inside, her footsteps hesitant. Once inside, I headed to the living room, sinking into the couch. Sarah stood by the door, her shoulders slumped. The room felt colder, the silence more pronounced. "Tom," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry for what happened tonight." I looked up at her, my emotions a turbulent mix of hurt and anger. "Sorry. That's it? You disappeared with Steve for over an hour, and when I finally found you, you were dancing with him like I wasn't even there." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I didn't realize how it must have looked. We were just having fun, and I lost track of time." I didn't mean to hurt you. Lost track of time. I repeated, my voice rising. Sarah, this wasn't just about losing track of time. It was about you being intimate with another man in front of me, in front of everyone. She took a step closer, her hands reaching out as if to comfort me, but I flinched away. Tom, please, listen. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never meant for any of this to happen. I shook my head, trying to contain the swell of emotions. You were flirting with Steve all night. You laughed at his jokes, touched him in ways you never touch me. It wasn't just a mistake, it felt deliberate. I didn't think it would come across that way, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I thought I was just letting loose. It was supposed to be harmless. Harmless? I echoed, my voice cracking. It felt like a betrayal. I felt like a pathetic husband standing on the sidelines while you were with someone else. Sarah's tears flowed freely now, her voice a desperate plea. Tom, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how my actions would affect you. I see now how wrong I was. I ran a hand through my hair, the weight of the night crashing down on me. It's not just about tonight. It's about trust. You and Steve, it's not just a mistake I can easily forgive. It's something that has damaged our relationship. Sarah knelt in front of me, her eyes searching mine. What can I do to make this right? I want to fix this, Tom. I really do.